Hello there, my name is Anjal Jain, and I would like to welcome you to See Beyond, a podcast in which we meet people who tell us how they see beyond their visual impairments. Before we get started today, I would just like to remind you that you can tune in to See Beyond on multiple platforms, which are all linked in the description below. Today, I am here with Robert Schulenburg, an outspoken individual who's going to tell us what he has learned over the years. Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming
Excited
on.
to be here.
Oh yeah, I'm very excited too. It's great to finally be able to meet you face to face.
Right. Yeah. So we had a few times to talk, and this is going to be great. I'm very excited to kind of share. And I really like what you're doing with the podcast here. So I'm happy to be on board and part of the project.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We have some great topics that we're going to talk about today. So I thought firstly we could start off with, could you explain the audience about your visual status?
Okay, so my name's Robert Schulenburg, and my vision is stable, but I've had low vision my whole life. For those who can see and who are looking at this recording from Zoom, you'll notice that my right eye droops a little bit. It's a little bit more bloodshot. On my left eye, it's a bit more clear, moves around a bit. So what ends up happening, I won't bore you with the fancy words, but parts of my eyes never formed when I was born. And that caused different complications throughout my life. I'm a guy who's now 43 years old. And, as we get older, things happen. So just like someone with retinopathy of prematurity, when you're born without parts of your eyes forming, you're at risk for retinal detachment. And that caught up to me when I was a teenager, really around the age of 9, I started having retinal detachments. That's what caused the loss of vision in my right eye. I had a partial detachment in my left eye when I was around 14, and that's been stable since then. It's 30 more years ago. But the other thing that kind of caught up to me and really caused a bit of a shift in how I did things and how I got around was about 10 years ago, when I was 40-ish. I had cataract. They found a cataract in my left eye. And what was really fascinating is that how my vision functioned was getting worse as the cataract was growing. If you want to think about numbers, it went from 2400 to 2600. It meant it was harder for me to see detail. I was really sensitive to glare. When they fixed the cataract, my vision shot back to 2250. Think about if you stood on the end zone of a football field and I stood on the 10-yard line, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both looking at a bus that was parked in the other end zone, and someone had painted this beautiful mural on the side of the bus. You and I would see about the same amount of detail, all right?
Okay.
If I moved back and stood next to you in that end zone, I'd still see the bus, but I wouldn't see as much detail. But
Okay.
going from having to move up to the 5-yard line, right, to being able to back all the way up to the 10-yard line was very overwhelming for me, going from 2600 to 2250-ish. I couldn't leave the house for 3 days. Water droplets in the sink were distracting me. Trees had so many leaves, fences with all the grains of wood. It was so much light and shadow.
Yeah.
So I also noticed that because of the way my lens works, I started to get a little more reluctant to travel during the middle of the day or at night. If headlights were coming right at me, it was very distracting. I started to get some kind of halos in my vision from headlights. And I made a choice at that point. I'd never been a cane user with stable low vision. But I did shift and got a guide dog back then. And I've had her now for, oh boy, 7.5 years. It'll be 8 years in November. And
Mm-hmm.
that's Macy, the world's most awesome guide dog. She's a chocolate lab. She's very silly, but she's great at what she does. We've been together, like I said, almost 8 years. She's 9.5 now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching on the video version of this podcast, you'll see a little picture of Macy pop up on the screen. She's very cute.
Super cute.
Yeah.
And that was a big change for me. It was very interesting because as a person with visual impairment, we go through life. I'm sure many people have experienced. If we're born with it, there's barriers to socialization. We don't know from social cues whether it's all right to approach people. People may misinterpret our body language and be reluctant to approach us. And as soon as I got my dog, pardon me, as soon as I got my dog, I did this little experiment because I was commuting from San Jose to Oakland in the Bay Area. It was about a 2.5 hour commute. And when I would be riding the bus or riding BART, I started to keep track of how many people asked me my dog's name. Now, I stopped counting at 200, and this was less than a month to get 200 people to approach me on the bus or the train to say, hey, that's a pretty dog. What's her name? After 200 people, how many people do you think had asked me my name?
I don't know. Is the right answer none or?
It was 3. You were closer than most people. Okay. They go like, oh, maybe half. No. Which is all to say that my dog is just way cuter than I am, which is fine. And if you're seeing the picture, it's true. But the reality is that the dog makes you approachable. And that was very new for me. And while I accepted the fact that they're approaching me because of the dog first, I did have to acknowledge, hey, they're approaching me. I could have casual conversations in a way I never could before. It really opened the door for me to become a little bit more socially fluent and a little bit more comfortable just having casual conversations and passing the time getting to know strangers. Mm-hmm. So that was a really interesting change in my life that a change in my vision created. Because if I hadn't, gained and lost and gained vision again, I wouldn't have ended up deciding to get my dog, and that would have kind of shifted my social dynamic for the last 10 years.
Yeah, wow, that little social experiment that you did is definitely very interesting. Like, it's like the very subtle details that like help you understand these messages. Like just you counting your dog's name helped you understand this realization, or how many times people came to ask about your dog's name.
Now, I do not want to weigh in on the cane versus guide dog debate because I will be perfectly honest. There's reasons I know people love their canes, and I am not going to take away from that. And I'll be the first person to say, canes don't poop, all right? You can't fold my dog up and put it in your bag or your purse. I can't do that. And so she's with me for good or bad 100% of the time. And so there's pros and cons. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and that's fine. But definitely there was this, again, this overwhelming newness, right? It was just as overwhelming when my cataract turned into an intraocular lens and I suddenly had all this new detail vision. It was like suddenly getting a high def TV when you've only had a black and white 13-inch screen. Mm-hmm. It was, I mean, I could see color before. I don't want to have anyone putting in the comments that couldn't you see color. No, I'm just making a technology comparison.
Yeah.
But no, jumping ahead with this new sudden like output of information, right? This new immersion. And then the dog, I get the dog. And now there's this immersion of socialization that had never been my experience in the, 4 decades before.
Wow. It's like almost, I don't want to say such a small change, but like one change of you getting the guide dog completely like changed your experience socially. That's
there was
great.
definitely there was new experiences which created new opportunities. And it's interesting because when I do travel, especially if I'm traveling outside the States, I don't have my dog with me.
Yeah.
But I'll take her. I mean, my most recent trip, I traveled across the country from Sacramento to Atlanta by train, and then Macy and I flew to the Virgin Islands and spent about a week on St. Thomas. And that was just kind of like Macy travels with me for business all the time. When we go on vacation, we travel all the time. And so being used to traveling with her and then going overseas and leaving her with a dog sitter so that she has her little doggy spa vacation. And I get, to travel without her, again, very different. And having to take the lead socially where I might be used to people
Just
interacting with
coming to you
others.
because you had Macy.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Or realizing when they see the dog, because one thing a dog does that a cane does is it lets people know that you can't see well. And when I approach someone and I have the dog and I ask for help, they're like, oh, this guy might not be able to see things. He might not see me. He might not read the signs. And to approach them and say, I'm sorry, I need help. Can you tell me where I am? Can you tell me, if I'm heading in the right direction? I'm trying to get to, place X. And usually what I found that's helpful for me, having lost a lot of pride in my years as I've become more and more of an adult, and by pride I just mean pridefulness, right? I've
Yeah.
got a lot of things I'm proud of, but just being able to look at someone and say, hey, I was wondering if you can help me. I can't read the street signs, and then just kind of a general wave at my face, on the right side to bring attention to my right eye. And then they start to kind of make a connection of, oh, this can't see. He actually does need my help. He's not being rude or difficult or obtuse. And so that's how I've had to approach people, because I don't have the dog to say my request is a legitimate request for assistance. And I
Yeah.
have to be, and yeah.
I mean that's very interesting. I haven't like thought about that before, so that's definitely new to me and very interesting. And now that we're on the topic of traveling, you are an avid traveler. It's so crazy. Like whenever you tell me your stories about your various traveling experiences, I can like literally hear the passion in your voice. Like you clearly love traveling, and you've lived in, or been through 67 countries, if I'm not mistaken. And like that's amazing. Like wow, it's definitely a dream. And I'm sure you fly solo a lot, don't you?
I do, yeah. And
Yeah.
there's some apps I use to track where I'm going where the number's less because they don't count US territories, or they'll count on some of them. I'm able to track like, oh, I traveled with friends or I traveled alone, and that's like a whole different metric. Sometimes I travel and meet people, like I'll ride ahead to like blindness organizations. That's one thing that I can do, is I'll approach an organization of people, working with people with disabilities in other countries, and say, I'm interested in coming to your country. Is there a community of people I could connect with? Or I just find, social sites or language sites, and basically say, I'm planning a trip, a vacation. Is there someone I could connect with to meet for coffee? And I just try to keep it very casual, like not, like I'm looking to date someone, or I'm looking to, anything romantic. Just I'd like someone to be able to meet while I'm there. And one thing that I have been doing for, gosh, at least 15 years or so, is I try to travel with a purpose, even if I'm traveling for fun. Sometimes I'm traveling to go ride horses. I spent a week in South Africa riding horses. I spent a week in Spain riding horses, where I'll be at a place where they specifically do training, and you can improve your skills and then go out into the bush or see the countryside by horseback, which is great because I don't, I'm not out there renting a car driving around.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to get out further into the country and see some scenery. when I keep looking over to my left, by the way, because that's where you are on my screen.
Oh, that's okay.
So I apologize if it's distracting.
No,
Um,
it's fine.
so with uh, the other thing that I'll do is, if I'm not going to do a specific thing, like I really want to go see this volcano, or I really want to go see this ancient city, um, I may also, or instead, I might be saying, when I was in the Philippines, I met someone who's doing work in Miramar, and I'm going to, but he lives in Vietnam, so I'm going to communicate with him, and he's going to tell me about who I should go see in Miramar. I haven't gone to Miramar yet, but I know the guy I'm going to talk to before I go, because he's going to connect me with blindness organizations. And when I go there, I'm going to meet some people that are visually impaired and talk to them about their experience, or talk to them about what their needs are. And that's kind of been driving some of my career. But it's also given me a guide to what parts of the country are accessible, and where should I go and what should I do, based on where the blind people are living or where they're getting services. And I found some really interesting, stories. In
Yeah.
Guyana, for example, it's the only English-speaking country in South America. It's kind of wedged in between Venezuela and Suriname on the north coast of South America, pretty close to Trinidad and Tobago. It's considered a Caribbean country as well as a Latin American country, and it's very similar to Belize in that way. And Belize is where I spent 3 years in the Peace Corps. So I had a pen pal that I was in correspondence with while I was living in the Caribbean, and I went and I lived with that family for about a month. And this was shortly after my cataract surgery, and I was kind of, exploring and testing and figuring out what I wanted. I didn't have my dog yet, and we went and we found a Independence Living Center, blind center for the people of Guyana. It was sponsored by International Lions Clubs. And I was asking them about how they do outreach and what programs they wanted. And they did this really interesting thing. They have a blind cricket team. And the cricket, I don't even know how to play cricket, much less blind cricket, And for those who understand baseball, it's different enough from baseball that you have to explain it. So I don't even know what blind cricket looks like, but they're passionate about cricket in Guyana, and they're passionate about blind cricket. But what this team does is, if they're going to go out into a village or an area or another town and play and do exhibition games on Friday evenings and a couple games on Saturday, and then come back on Sunday, they'll actually arrive in town Wednesday or Thursday with their families, and they'll visit that town. They'll go to the cafes, they'll go to the restaurants, they'll walk around, and they'll be blinded in public together. And that's how they are ambassadors for blindness. That's how they advocate in their communities of, look at me living and eating and walking around, and you're going to see me play cricket. That's not just a trick I do. That's something I do because I'm also an athlete, as
And
well as an independent human being.
mhm. And now that we were on the topic of kind of like being an ambassador, I remember you were telling me a very interesting story about like you're traveling to other foreign countries, and how in foreign countries there's like a cultural gap between like our understanding of culture and like theirs. And so a lot of times you've been in scenarios in which you kind of like felt uncomfortable, but the other person didn't realize that they were making you uncomfortable. So if you could like tell us about that story, that would be great.
There's been a few, and again, it helps as I've grown older and wiser. Uh, I've learned through experience, where I've been able to think back and go, what can I do better? What happened here? And there's been times, so I was traveling in the Philippines, and the girlfriend I was traveling with at the time, we were in Ace Hardware, which they have in the Philippines, and I was getting an adapter for my phone. I realized that the young man was staring at me, and it was kind of distracting because I was trying to pay for my charger, and this was like the first purchase I had made while I was in that country, and so I'm kind of like trying to figure out my money, and I think that's why it was staring at me, is because I'm trying to figure out, is this a 20 or a 50? Is this 100 or 1,000?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to check the register. How much do I owe, and do I have close to exact change? And I didn't even know the coins yet. Forget about that. I was just going to overpay and get change back. And the young man staring, and I say young, he's probably 19, and he's staring at me. And I said, hey, you got a problem there? And he goes, no, sir. And I said, well, please don't keep staring at me, or I'm going to have a problem. It was really it was the kind of thing where in the States that might have been a little blustery, but it would have been sort of understood that most folks would say, yeah, that guy was, judging you for being disabled. This kid was staring at me, and in retrospect, probably not judging me, probably just fascinated, curious, and didn't know what to say or think or do. And we're, I'm sure we can talk later about how people perceive disability in other countries, because that's going to, well. So the young man got up and he left, and I made my purchase, and we walk out of the store, and my girlfriend tore into me. She's just like, why did you do that, Mahal? That was like the stupidest thing you could have done. And I'm like, well, I just, he was staring at me. I felt it was rude. She said, of course he was staring at you. And it didn't have to do anything with your eyes. Rob, you are the biggest, widest guy in this mall right now. Everyone is staring at you. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. This is, why does it have to be about my eyes? Why does it have to be about judgment? He, for all I know, he's just trying to see a foreigner do something for the first time. And every now and then, I know just enough Tagalog to be polite, salamat, and, sige, for, thank you and goodbye. And, that could have been enough. It's like seeing a dog drive a car. And you're like going, wait, did that just happen? And so there's these moments we have where we can be ambassadors, and we don't always succeed in those. And I've been lucky enough to try to learn from them.
Yeah, and like when you're saying we lose the opportunity of being an ambassador, you were also telling me of a story when you were in like the Peace Corps, right? And you were telling me how like you kind of regretted how you reacted in the situation. So could you tell us how you acted and how you like could have been an ambassador kind of for the people listening?
Absolutely. And again, I say this, if there's any pride in what I'm saying, it's coming from a position that I have learned from the experience. But the reality is it was, I'd been living on the island of St. Lucia for about 3 months. It was my second Peace Corps posting. I was actually now with Peace Corps Response, which does short-term placements for people who've been Peace Corps volunteers. You go in and you do short-term placements. So instead of 2 to 4 years, you might be doing 3 months to 15 months. And so I was in the middle of my service there, and I had a long day. It was a Friday, so long week, summer, hot. I'm up at 4 a.m. to catch a bus to the capital of Castries so that I can catch a bus to the end of the island to Viewfort, and I've got to connect in Soufrière to get there, and it's this long thing. You'd think like, hey, it's only 15 miles away, but you're winding through mountains because it's an island. There's no real straight roads except next to the airport where they got that runway, and everything else is just follows the shape of the land. So it's a long day in a bumpy van on a winding road. I didn't have breakfast because my landlady hadn't made it for me because I left too early. I had had a very small lunch that was provided for me at the school, which was lovely, but I was a big guy and getting a lot of exercise. So I'm trying to, I got back to Castries at 4:30 and I was hungry. And the only thing I was thinking about was getting to that Church's Chicken next to the mall because they had a Church's Chicken. And I was going to get me a Texas chicken sandwich with a small root beer and a small fries, and it was going to be great. And I got there just as Castries let out for the weekend. The kids were out of school. The adults came into town. Market was over. The people were starting to get off of work. There's going to be like a street fair, like a party was setting up for the whole city. And people were at the mall and at the Church's Chicken and filling up downtown. And it's this real festival kind of fun atmosphere. And I'm in the middle of it. I'm in that line at Church's Chicken and I'm hungry and I'm just thinking like, oh man, this is going to be great to sit down with the ice cold root beer and a big chicken sandwich. And about 5 people back, I hear this, hey, white boy, hey, white boy. And I look around and I am sure enough the only white boy in the place. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, just, maybe drunk. I don't know. If he really needs me, he can come up and talk to me, which he did. Surprise to me. And he walks up and he pats me on the shoulder and goes, hey, white boy, I haven't talked to you. I said, okay, old man, what do you want? And he goes, I want to know, is the reason your eye's so small because you can't see? Which is about the strangest thing to be asked when it's the first thing someone ever asks you.
Yeah.
It's the first time in my life that had ever happened. That's the first question. And I'm sitting here amazed, and I went, what? And he figured I genuinely didn't hear him, so he's louder now. He says, I said, white boy, is the reason your eye's so small because you can't see? Oh my Lord, I'm getting red. I'm, just like, yes, man, yes. That's the truth. Yes, that's what it is. And this is where I failed, because under my breath, as I turned away, I used my outside the head voice, and I muttered in a way I didn't think he could hear me, the Antillean Creole for a curse word, which is F-O-K, folk. And I regret this to this day, because he just had a yes and no question. And good on him for wanting to know. And his response in some ways was absolutely appropriate. Hey, why you have to curse me up, white boy? All I want to know is if the reason your eye's so small is because you can't see, and now you want to curse me up. I said, look, man, I don't want to curse you up. I'm sorry, I'm tired. And 3 people back, this other guy jumps in. Hey, old man, stop cursing up the white boy. And the old man turns and says, I'm not cursing up the white boy. All I want to know is if the reason his eye's so small is because he can't see. Well, that's none of your business if his eye's so small he can't see. But why you gotta be cursing him up? I know curse him up, he cursed me up first. And they just start in, and then this woman jumps in and says, that's right, I heard the white boy. He cursed the man up. All the man want to know is if his eye's so small because he can't see, and this white boy wants to curse him. And they just boom, 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 boom. They were taking sides, and I'm just like 2 people from the register going, I need to get out of here. And this whole thing started, and I was not involved anymore. They are now having a national discussion about whether or not it was appropriate to ask me about the size of my eyes, and whether or not that was related to whether or not I did or didn't have a disability, and whether or not that made a difference, and whether it was appropriate for me to be upset by this question. And I'm sitting here going, and a small fries with ice, that would be great. And to go, please. And I just
emphasis on the to go.
Yeah, and I just, I was going to sit and dine in, but I figured that might not have gone over well. And so I just grabbed my bag and headed out around the crowd as a small riot was forming. And again, these opportunities we have, no one has these extreme examples, but there's always unintended consequences, because the next disabled person that guy's going to run into, maybe he won't want to talk to them. The next person who looks different, people may be reluctant to help. And I felt that I then had a mission for the rest of the time I was there because people knew who I was. And I knew this already because there were times I'd get in the van to go out to my village where I lived. And I'd say, yes, I'm going to Miss Elizabeth's next to George the Brickmaker. And they'd say, oh, so you're the Peace Corps that live up there with the small eyes. And I'd go, yes, with that one's me. And they would, so everybody knew, they knew where I lived. I probably was the only one with the small eyes in the country. And so I needed to improve my public image. And as the years go by, you think, why did I only have to do that when I lived on an island?
Yeah, so definitely being an ambassador is incredibly important. And while we're kind of on this topic, we were kind of talking about how the cultural gap when you travel to foreign countries can cause like misunderstandings, like how you told us. But also, you were telling me how the language barrier can actually provide as beneficial. And you're telling me about your Chinese tea story, if you could tell us about
Oh,
that.
yeah.
About how like
Exactly.
traveling to
Right.
foreign countries could be easier for you in some instances.
In some ways, because even without having to wave my hand at my face, there's sometimes this sense of, if I can get pegged as a tourist, people will meet me halfway. And let me explain. Because, for example, I would be in Macau, and this is where I had the epiphany. So I'll tell you what happened in Macau. As I was saying, I am trying to find this tea shop. I can't remember. It's the Golden Peacock tea shop. And the person on the corner says, oh, and they turn and they point and they say, you just go down the block, but before you get to the next corner, there'll be an alley next to the green sign for the Green Phoenix laundry, and you turn there and go down into that alley. Do you see, the sign for the laundry? And I would say, no, I can't see the sign for the laundry. But I was going to follow up by saying, but I'll just look for a green sign when I get down there. But they interrupt me and they said, oh, that's right, you can't read Chinese. So they're saying, can you see the laundry? And they mistook my disability for simple illiteracy, which in reality, that's kind of what it is. When I'm traveling through airports, and we can talk about escorts at airports later, because I'm sure that's a topic that some folks, talk about sometimes. I get escorts at airports because I can't read the signs, and I don't want to wander into a secure area. I don't want to slow people down. I don't want to miss my flight or find out that there's been a gate change, right? Because I can't read the signs. Now, can I read? Yes, I can get my monocular out. I can use my phone as a distance or a near focus magnifier. I can use my eyeglasses to read. I'm usually on me at any given time. I have 2 or 3 ways to read, but I have to get them out and use them for them to work.
Yeah.
And so while traveling, and especially just walking down the street, I don't have my glasses on because I can't travel, wearing my reading glasses. And so here I am just saying, am I close? And they're going, you're really close. Just go down there to the laundromat. And then they're like, wait, you're not from here. You can't read Chinese. And it hit me. When I'm in China, I'm not blind, I'm illiterate. And if I stay illiterate, I'm actually a fully functioning human being. And as soon as I learn to read Chinese, then I go back to being blind. If that makes
so you're basically saying that like sometimes traveling in foreign countries can be easier because the language barrier, they assume that you don't speak, understand, and read the native language. So they know that you can't read the signs,
They
but
meet
really,
me halfway,
yeah.
and they start giving me landmarks. And again, it's just like if I came with my dog and they go, this guy might have some trouble, I will help him. Or when I wave at my eye and say, I can't read the sign. Or if I'm just there, being an American in, Hong Kong or China, saying, hey, where do I go? I don't know where the laundromat is. And they're going, oh yeah, okay, go down 3 stores, look for the alley, turn left.
Hmm.
Awesome. And that is easier.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because there's a sense of when people have a reason to help, they usually want to.
Yeah.
And when I'm traveling, people have more reasons to help me than when I'm here, because when I'm here, people assume I shouldn't need help, or they
Mhm.
don't understand how I would need it.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of times from an outsider's perspective, it's hard to understand what the person is feeling or how they function with visual impairment. So that's why a lot of times, like you're saying, when you go to a foreign country and there's a language barrier, they already assume that like you can't read the signs, so they're already going to help you out
They're looking
naturally.
for ways,
Yeah.
right? They're looking for ways to help that out. Like even if I go into a restaurant in Iraq, and it will be a Lebanese restaurant in Iraq, and that kind of cracks me up even more, because the guy will be talking to me in English. He'll offer me a menu and then say, would you like me to tell you what's on the menu? And he's not asking because I'm visually impaired. He's asking because I don't read Lebanese.
Yeah, but I mean, it helps. It
Right?
definitely, yeah, helps traveling in foreign countries in that sense. So,
Yeah.
wow, we've gone through so much good advice. You gave such great advice today. And I think like one last thing I wanted to cover for the traveling passion of yours, is the matter of an escort and whether you like using a wheelchair or not in the airports. That was very interesting.
So, yeah, I thought we'd get back to that. Yeah. So with I will absolutely respect anyone who has a differing opinion on this.
Yeah.
And I am not calling for action in the community or judging. There is no wheelchair shaming on this podcast. But I do generally ask for an escort, or what they might call a meet and assist. In America, especially with like Southwest, like in LAX, Sacramento, San Francisco International, these are the airports I travel through the most. They'll refer to it as a meet and assist. These are a service provided by the airport, not the individual airlines, to make sure that you can get to the gate. They usually come with wheelchairs, and these folks are getting very comfortable with the idea of, if I'm sitting there with my dog, or I'm traveling on my own, say I'm coming back into the country and I don't have my dog yet, they'll say, where are you going? I'll show them the ticket, and I say, can you help me get through security so I'm not holding anybody up? Can you help me get to the gate? Once I get to the gate, I'm good. I can find my way around, or maybe you can at least point out where the closest bathroom is, or if there's some place to eat around here. And they're like, okay, got it. And they'll say, do you want a wheelchair? And I will always decline. And
Mhm.
part of that, again, comes to this idea of, I want to present as a person where the reason I'm using the service is because I can't see, not because I can't
Yeah.
walk. And part of that is to challenge a stereotype that doesn't exist as much in America, though I do run into it now and then, um, and that is present in other countries, that if you have an issue in one part of your body, or one disabling condition that seems to be prevalent, there's this perception that it's pervasive across systems. I think I shared with you a story about the young man I was working with in the Peace Corps, who was finally allowed to go to school, and he had no fingers on his left hand. His left hand had like little nubs.
Hmm.
And he learned to write no, it was his right hand. I'm left-handed. He was right-handed. And he learned to write by putting the pencil in his wrist and holding it in his wrist, and then he would write with his arm, running his arm around to write on the paper. And kid was smart. He was 2 years behind when he enrolled, and he was only 1 year behind in like 6 months, because they had not let him into school for 2 years. And
Because it's
as
like the assumption that just because he doesn't have fingers,
the
he's
fingers,
intellectually not as smart.
they
Yeah.
thought that, and they were saying we wouldn't know how to teach him. And I said, the only thing he can't do is play the piano with 2 hands.
Yeah.
It's and they, as they got to know him better, his name was Silas. As they got to know Silas better, they realized this kid was smart. He's probably the smartest kid in the class. And then it was normalized. It's like Silas is a brilliant kid, and we're going to love working with him. But the initial assumption was he was in the head not as good, and that he would be physically frail. And I will share this with you. I didn't tell you this before when we did our pre-interview, but there was a time where this directly impacted potentially my life, because when I was born, they realized that because my eyes shook with the nystagmus, because they knew there was something wrong with my eyes. They did do a biopsy. They did surgery. They pulled my eyes out, looked at them, looked at the optic nerve, put my eyes back in. I was a newborn. And then they approached my parents and said, okay, here's the situation. Your son is probably totally blind. He's also probably hard of hearing. He will never learn to walk. He's intellectually impaired and will need constant care his entire life in order to be safe and have his needs met. If you want to sign these papers, we have a social worker down the hall who will take custody of your child, and he will become a ward of the state. 2 years old, and the doctors are willing to give me away because I had an issue with my eyes that they saw, and they were telling my parents that I had all these other challenges.
Yeah, they kind of like translated
Just
it to your
based on my
hearing.
eyes, right?
Intellectually.
Exactly. My mom also tells a story about how when I was maybe 2, 3 years old, apparently I was at the grocery store and I was a little kid running around grabbing everything. And I would grab the magazines and I'd hold them up real close and read the magazines, or look at the cakes or whatever on the covers of the women's magazines by the front, or I'd look at the different people in the clothes on the front of the magazines, or I'd look at the candy bars. And my mom referred to them as old biddies. So they were probably some very fussy older women. And they had their opinions about me and my mother and her ability as a parent. And so what they were saying were things like, according to my mom, look at that little blind boy running around, that person should be in a hospital, the mother should at least get him glasses, but he shouldn't really be allowed out in public. And according to my mom, I walked up to her and said, loud enough for the cashier to hear, Mama, how come it is that when some people think you can't see, they also think you can't hear? And my mom gave one of the best answers you can give to that question, which was, according to the oral tradition of our family, well, son, some people are just stupid.
I hope they heard that. Did they hear it?
I couldn't tell you. I don't remember this story so much, but it was a story told back to me as I was growing up. And the thing is that if we take that word stupid and just make it ignorant, they didn't know. And you can't expect someone to know something they don't know, or that they weren't taught. And if we can be patient with that and then educate, and again, come back to being an ambassador, that is what we want, whether we're traveling around the world or we're just being ourselves in our neighborhood.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the main idea that I'm seeing throughout all these amazing experiences you've told me about, is being an ambassador and being willing to educate people who, as you said, may be ignorant to your visual impairment, and being able to advocate for yourself in new environments.
Or being open to recognizing other abilities that I might have.
Yeah, exactly.
But, yeah. And that's what we want folks to see in all of us. We don't want to be judged for people seeing us have one bad day and thinking that person's a horrible person. We want people to say, let's turn our judgments into questions. If that person's struggling, what's happening there? Is there something I can do to help? Is this the way that it always is for them? Or is this something that I'm going to see differently if I saw them at home? And so these are, this is the challenge for anybody listening to this or living their life, which is, can we turn our judgments into questions?
Yeah. And I mean, we're kind of getting short on time, but I really wanted to cover 2 more topics. So one of them relating to traveling is I know that you're also very passionate about photography and the amazing, cool countries you've been to. You've taken some amazing pictures, which you'll
Thank
hopefully
you.
be seeing pop up on the screen right now. And I wanted to ask you, like, why you got into photography and how that's kind of shaped your ideas and your thoughts.
You know, it's a funny thing because when we were talking about this the other day, I realized that I don't keep photos at home of friends and families. I don't, and part of it is just because, faces is kind of a whatever. You know, it's not as engaging for me to look back and see a picture of a group of people sitting on a park bench or huddled together over appetizers. I'm not judging anyone. That doesn't work for me, but I have over the years, ever since I've been traveling, camping, when I studied in London for the summer, I took pictures. And the thing is that what I was finding, which was amazing, was the universal beauty in the world, that whether I'm in Cambodia or Indonesia or the Philippines or Cairo, wherever I've been traveling, wherever I've been in the last 30 years of traveling overseas, there is the things you will see. There is a sunset in every country, and it's amazing how all the colors are used differently. There is symmetry and beauty both in nature and in how man chooses to live. We see this man-made architecture imposing itself on the natural world. We see natural shapes in man's creations. We also see amazing symmetry and beauty expressed in the natural world as well. And that if I don't have to travel around the world to see that, but when I do see that, it affirms even more that there's beauty at home. Because if there's beauty there and there's beauty there, there's got to be beauty everywhere.
Yeah,
And
that's such a
this
nice
I
message.
Yeah, and just if you're looking at my work right now, you'll see that most of it, and again, this isn't something I'm doing to make money. It's just something I enjoy. I do have an Instagram account there that I put travel photos up on, but you'll see that it's usually a celebration of colors, vibrant colors that are occurring naturally in the world. It's a celebration of shapes. It's a celebration of flow and direction. And so those are the things where, whether it's focusing on a building or a person or an image, whether it's a picture of someone else's art, like I've got a few statues in there. There's a really great one that looks like the eye of a hurricane, that's in front of the National Museum in Jakarta. That is it was built as a symbol of unity for their country. The idea that it all pulls towards the center. And I thought that was fantastic, a wonderful message. And so those things are what I try to capture, because those are the things that I feel I want to share with my friends.
Yeah, and I think it's completely right what you're saying is like photography kind of help you realize that there's beauty in everything. And I know kind of right now in the modern era, there's like these unrealistic beauty standards. And if you don't look like everyone else, then all of a sudden, like you're not coined as with the term beautiful. But that's completely wrong. There's beauty in everything. And I think photography really helps
I
you,
think if
me, and us both see that. Yeah.
I think of it, if you think of it as like a three-legged stool or a cycle, that beauty, power, and strength all feed into each other.
Yeah. Okay, and I think I would love to keep talking about this more. It's so interesting to like hear all these things for you, but unfortunately, we're getting short on time. So our last thing to talk about today was your work with the Disability Solutions International. So could you tell us more about it, what you guys do, how it
Oh,
works?
absolutely. So, Disability Solutions International is a nonprofit. A group of us got together when we were working for another agency, because we felt that the work we were doing with that agency, while it's good and continues to be good, we weren't able to go beyond what we felt were the needs for the people in our community and the people that we were running into in our day-to-day lives and as we went out into the world. So while we all had different strengths and different communities that we were interacting with, we saw common needs. And so the purpose of Disability Solutions International, I'll call it DSI, is that we want to promote the perception of peer equity. We want to promote equity for people with disabilities in their community. And while I live in California, we go into the world as well as work with people in the United States. We are building a mentorship program. Our mentorship program is called Pathfinders. It's one-on-one mentorship where we offer sessions, once, twice, 4 times a month, based on folks' needs. These are free of charge. We're going to be also beginning to offer employment-based mentorship through departments of rehabilitation. We're currently working to contract with the state of Nevada, and we'll hope to expand into other states once we get the Nevada contract completed and accepted. And with an intention of returning to California to do Department of Rehab work in California down the road. The work we do in other countries is normally capacity building. We want to work with organizations to expand their footprint and to make sure that their programming is quality programming, meaning it's efficient and effective and sustainable. And then we also want to assist those organizations by being fellow advocates and helping provide education opportunities for people in those areas. So right now I'm developing projects with folks in Egypt, northern Iraq, in the territories of Kurdistan. I've worked with folks in Macedonia. We're in communication with a really great organization, the Francina Hungria Foundation in Dominican Republic. We don't have any projects currently slated with them, but I just want to give them a shout out because they're doing such great work. I've done consultation with Resources for the Blind in the Philippines on best practices for transition planning, though we don't have any formal projects with them. But finding ourselves in an area and finding that there's needs for people with disabilities, we naturally gravitate towards them. Myself and another colleague has done work with Sensational Ability in Hong Kong, which is dedicated to getting people with disabilities employed in mainstream bigger, like the biggest companies and corporations in Hong Kong. They'd like those companies to lead the way in hiring people with disabilities, and we've provided public advocacy and consultation with them, and we'd like to develop projects or at least be available as a consultant with them moving forward. We're very new. Even though we registered as a nonprofit in Nevada and California 2 years ago, we did get our 501c3 status in January. And with the current climate we have, we are finding ourselves with more time to work on this project, and it's becoming my full-time project. So I'm no longer with my former agency, which gives me the liberty to expand and really dig deep into what we want DSI to do. So with that said, we're going to be launching a capital campaign in the next month, which would be September 2020. So I'm not sure when what the time of this broadcast will be. But look for us on Facebook, and by the time of the broadcast, we might have our actual website open. Keep looking for dsi.ngo. That's Nevada Golf Oscar. It's not live yet, but it might be by the time you're listening to this. And you will find us on Facebook under Disability Solutions International. You will also find us on Instagram. You can see some of the people that I've been visiting in the last year. And you can find me on Instagram at Rob is Walking, all one word. And just if you're interested in learning more finding ways to help, or if there's a need that you'd like met in your community through mentorship, recreation, social meetups, anything related to community building or capacity building, please write to us at info@dsi.ngo. Our emails are active. So if you do info@dsi, that's Delta Sierra Igloo .ngo, Nevada Golf Oscar, we'll be happy to share you more information, work with you to develop programs and projects in your area, or answer any questions or provide any resources you might need related to moving forward as a person with a disability or moving the community of people with disabilities forward.
Yeah, well, great. Disability Solutions International sounds amazing. And I'll definitely include all the links that you mentioned right now in the description below. So it's an easier way to access Facebook page, Instagram page, and everything.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. It's been so great talking to you. The time flew by so fast because I learned so much. And I hope all the viewers were able to take away something from this episode too. So thank you so much for coming.
This has been a lot of fun for me. I really appreciate you extending this opportunity, and consider us a friend of the program. And if there's anything we can do to help you out, let us know. But for the viewers out there, keep tuning into the next podcast. These are great. I had a lot of fun, and I love the mission that Anjal started here.
Well, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe so you are notified when a new episode is posted. Rate and review this podcast and share it with your friends. And thank you so much for listening. And I hope you're leaving with some great things that will help you see beyond.